Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Contínua. Today, we are honored to have an incredible guest, Pedro Delgado, vice-president at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI. Pedro has spent his entire career transforming health systems across the world, from Brazil to United Kingdom and beyond. His work focuses on quality improvement, health equity, and leadership in driving systemic change. Welcome, Pedro. It's so nice to have you.
Isa, it's so good to be here with you. And there's so many good memories of kind of time spent together in the past, thinking about transformation and improvement of and learning together. So it's good to be here, and it's always good to be in a way back in my home of birth, which is Latin America. So
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
so good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Um, we have a lot of memories with you too. You were the pioneer here with this QI quality improvement thing. I think we are here because of you. We have to be, fair play here. I think if it wasn't for you, w- this movement should never have that would never have started here in Latin America, especially in Brazil. I came from the first wave of Especialista em Melhoria, which is the translation of, I think, improvement advisor, what you've decided to make it in Portuguese. So I am very honored and very proud to be part of this movement. So thank you so much in advance for your time, for your availability, and for all you've done for us so far. So to start, I would love to explore a little bit the role of continuous improvement in global health. You have worked on large scale health, we all know that, in improvement initiatives across the globe. Could you share with us some of the most impactful projects you've been involved with and the key factors that made them successfully?
I'll try to address both questions. He said one is the role of quality improvement in global health, and it's interesting. And I'll confess my view of improvement and my view of health as well. We have a planet that's undergoing some really severe changes and transformations, and there's some forces that are really strong that at some point somebody will explain to me, but things like war and violence, like we are better than that as a humanity. And then the pressures that applies to the economic systems that we live under, where governments are having to spend more on security, which means they can spend less on health and housing and other things that really matter. So in the midst of that, and on a climate that's polarized and where there's post-truth and populism, I think the role of health and the role of improvement are fundamental. If you think about health, your practice in dentistry, the hospitals that are near you, people visit you. They come, and if they feel well treated by you, they feel welcome, they feel their appointment is on time, the quality of the intervention that you provide is good, and you treat them with dignity, and you look them in the eyes, and you ask them what matters to you, and they walk out of there better people, and you walk out of there as a better person because you're providing something that's kind of beautiful. So I think we have millions of interactions in health and healthcare every single day where we can make a difference to the social climate, which is much bigger. So the role of improvement within that is very much about both improving the systems and also about having some impact on the social climate, because a system in healthcare can only and should only ever be continuously improving. We are imperfect, every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. And we do things that are so complex. So you have you and your professional background and your personality. And so you have a patient and their physiological variables and their behaviors and their background and so on. Then you have the buildings that we do this in. Then we have the technology we have so many things. It's not possible to provide a perfect standard of care every time. So our responsibility is to continuously improve. Now, there's a more systematic way to do it by using the improvement science and the improvement method. And there's a more intuitive way to do it, which is everybody improves all the time. Everybody improves all the time because that's the ethos of healthcare. Healthcare is packed with people who care about other people, people who care about making lives better, and people who are invested because they're so dedicated to this. They spend hours preparing and studying, then they spend hours delivering care, then they spend hours worrying about their patients, and so it's a kind of beautiful environment to have an impact, and the role in global health of improvement is fundamental. Whether it's improvement in a systematic way as part of a quality management system in a very organized manner, or intuitive improvement, it's fundamental. So that's kind of for me, the crux of the question. And in terms of efforts, oh, there's so many. It would be unfair to pick a few, but I would probably highlight a couple. So the cesarean section work that's been
I
going.
knew. I knew. I knew.
It's kind of beautiful. It's a group of very committed obstetricians and healthcare teams and institutions that decided to fundamentally change a historically established reality. And that's kind of really exciting. The same is happening here in the UK right now with the Race and Health Observatory and the National Health Service. We've been working with them to reduce the differential in mortality between Black and Asian mothers. There are 3 or 4 times more likely to die during birth than white mothers. So we're trying to reduce that differential so best possible care is there for everyone and not just for a section of. So when you try to combine improvement with equity, it's beautiful. And then of course I have a niece who's 4 years old called Emilia. She's my brother's daughter. She's absolutely beautiful, and she's very bubbly and always in good spirits and very creative. And in Spanish, we call her pícara. She's always got something cool in her eyes and in her demeanor. She has cancer. She has chronic myeloid leukemia, and I have been working with an amazing group of people from St. Jude's Global and hospitals in 6 Latin American countries initially, including Brazil, and now about 24 countries around the world to improve the 5-year survival of children with cancer. In low and middle income countries, that survival is a lot worse than in high income countries. So in high income countries, about 85% of these children survive. In our countries, in low and middle income countries, between 20 and 50%. And that shouldn't be. So those are some of the most exciting pieces of work that I've had the privilege to work with other people on. But there's a long list. What really works at the very top of that list is a willingness to be humble and to understand each other, to have dialogues of co-production and co-design, rather than thinking that we have all the answers. We have a protocol, so you should do this. What do you think, Isa? How does it work in your context? Let me understand what your process looks like. Gather with your team, have a conversation, map it out, see what your baseline looks like, and then we can work from there. And by the way, there are protocols and things that could be helpful for you. But the initial attitude of humility, I think, is something that characterizes really, really impactful improvement work. Secondly, is leadership that is willing to be committed over the long term. So I could call that maybe constancy of purpose, meaning, that there might be financial pressures, that it may not be the most politically popular idea, but it's the right thing to do. So you commit to it and you gather people and you create a coalition so committed leadership over humility, committed leadership over time. And the last one is an attitude of testing and learning rather than a paradigm of kind of planning for the perfect intervention and then hoping that it works. Testing and learning invites action, and this action orientation is so important to improving systems. I think there's a view of systems that's our imaginary view, where this is like this and that is like that, and it's like the perfect scenario. And then there's reality. And the reality of reality is that even in the same setting is so different. So in Brazil, we've been working on Saúde Nossas Mãos, and that work is continuing to expand through a beautiful network of people. And when you look at the 188 intensive care units that have been participating, they're all different. So to expect that they copy paste a change between one and the other is almost absurd. But to expect that they have some common ingredients is very logical, very logical. So there is a power in the dignity that comes with asking people in their own context, you tell us what you think, you tell us what your process looks like, and then there's some interventions that could be helpful, and let's go design and let's go produce. So those are some of the those are some of the high level core lessons of the pieces of work that are really, really impactful versus the pieces of work that maybe struggle a bit.
Lovely. Pato de Quadro was historical. It was amazing what happened in Brazil. I think it it was a pioneer project that sort of opened doors and opened minds so that other people came and it started to think, wow, that's possible. We can do that in Brazil as well. It's not the thing for United States. It's not a thing that for Europe. We don't need to be rich to do improvement. And I love this quote. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. I think uh, we have to fix the systems. One of the first things I've learned from you in 2015, maybe 2016. I don't remember. Okay, so let's shift a little bit to another subject that I know that you have a special seat in your heart. That is health equity. One of the key areas of focus in global health is health equity. In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges in ensuring equitable access to healthcare, and how can organizations address them effectively, especially nowadays in these economical challenges, political crisis, and this challenge that we are facing? Tricky, tricky, tricky.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, and maybe I'll reflect with you on the question itself. So to me, there's probably four things to consider around equity when it comes to patients. One is access, as you said. I mean, that's so important. Secondly, though, as important is experience. Once you access that you have an experience, that's excellent. And third is outcomes. Once they have access, and even if they have a good experience, are those outcomes as good as they should or could be, and are there differences? And for some systems, those differences are invisible because they're not collecting data in a disaggregated way. So they have patient data that is aggregated, and then they look at the outcomes for patients, but they don't necessarily gather the demographic data to understand what communities are being left behind. So to me, part of the challenges start with data and segmentation of data and being able to learn about what's happening. The, there's a second element within the space of equity, which is in some contexts, issues like racism are part of how we behave with each other as a system. So when you have issues in the staff complement, it's very hard to then be able to be open to tackling racism in the access, in the experience, and in the outcomes. If I come from a minority population and I feel vulnerable because I'm not being treated with the dignity and respect that I think I deserve. So if you have that as the underlying sociology of your context, it's really hard to tackle equity externally because you yourself need to address your stuff first. So some organizations like Einstein Hospital have been doing these rondas de equidad, these equity rounds, which are a wonderful way to engage staff in a conversation. So what does it feel like for you what's missing, what could we be doing better, and so on. And then once you start to heal there, you're much stronger and much better positioned to try to heal outwardly in the space of equity. And then the last challenge, which I think is probably the most important, is one of relentless pace versus patience. And I'll tell you why. These are historically grounded issues. They're systemic. They have been there forever. We have been blind to them, or we just haven't wanted to address them because we have too many other things. But right here and right now, there is an equity world and an equity agenda that's trying to make things better. And that does not mean being victims and feeling fully angry and resentful about. It's the way that we have been. We need to heal and we need to work and we need to make it better. But a historically grounded, systemic, endemic or pandemic of things like racism and others will not get solved or improved significantly in 1 year or in 2 years or in 3 years. It's been hundreds of years. So we need to give these things time. So we need to be relentless and keep the pace, and we need to be patient and accept that there will be bumps on the road, that we will have to have tolerance and patience and be grounded in love and in our solidarity with each other and in our humanity and in our sense of possibility and so on. Because fundamentally, the gift of this generation is that the next generation that comes will have a better experience overall, where they will see hopefully less equity gaps and start from a much better baseline than we started. So that's a generational gift. But for that, you need to have relentless pace and patience, and underneath that, intentionality to make sure this work continues. Some people get very frustrated. Well, I tried, it didn't work, so I'm just gonna. No, you tried, it didn't work. Let's just try again. What did you learn? How could we do it again? And how can we overcome some of the things that have been there for hundreds of years? It will take time. So just keep at it and build a community so that you can exchange ideas, talk. It's almost like group therapy. Let's just have our friends that we can pick up the phone and say, oh my, this was so frustrating. What do I do? They may have ideas. And if not, they may just be there to listen.
Well, in the end, it's all about people, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah, I love it. Beautiful said. And it brings us to our next topic. It's humanizing healthcare and transformational leadership, which is, in my opinion, and I think everybody agrees, one of your superpowers, leadership. The human side of healthcare is overshadowed by efficient driven systems. How do we bring back in these so difficult times of war and aggressivity? How do we bring back, Pedro, compassion, dignity, meaningful patient engagement in healthcare? I think I'm being hard on you today.
All right. Yeah, you are, but it's such an important question. I mean, honestly, it's such an important question. And actually, it gives me a chance to invite people into a conversation with you and I that will probably be kind of much longer than this podcast. So I recently came across, and this is a suggestion for people. I'm gonna give you two things that I think are really interesting. One is a book, and the book is called The Last Human Job. It's a beautiful book by a sociologist called Alison Pugh from Johns Hopkins, and she does a really, really nice job in illustrating some of the work of reconnecting and ensuring that as we make this transition to embracing the best of AI, for instance, we don't dehumanize care. We don't dehumanize care because that comes with suffering for the providers who are now feeling being left out, and for the patients. And I'll give you just one example of equity, actually. So if you think about a future for mental health where maybe some of the algorithmic AI, machine learning driven tools will give access to so many more people to a conversation, that is going to be a tool that's going to be widely available for the planet. And it's likely that the services of talking therapies, so the opportunity that you and I are having of seeing each other in the eyes, of having a little bit of chemistry, of doing nuanced questions and back and forth, will be exclusive to those that can pay for that. For the rest of the population, they'll only be getting a robot. So what's better and what's more value? And are we increasing are we going to be in a position where we're going to be increasing inequities as opposed to closing those equity gaps by providing more access? Yeah, access, but is that access nuanced enough and connected enough and so on? So there's something that we in the leadership space need to consider about bringing humanity to the transitions that we are experiencing right now intentionally, so that we don't just jump at the newest technology, but rather reflect on the human aspect of change. And then there is a tool that's, I think, underappreciated and probably underestimated, which I absolutely adore, for thinking about how to lead with compassion and with kindness and so on. And it's a conversational tool. It's a kind of tool that should be in everyone's toolkit, I think, for leadership in healthcare. And it's called appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry, which is based on some core principles. One is the constructionist principle. So reality is socially constructed through language and conversation. So you're always building by conversations, and those conversations are guided by questions. There's a simultaneity principle, which is that inquiry and change happen together. So as you're inquiring, you're changing, because that dialogue is leading you through questions through a better place. There's the third principle is the poetic principle. And this kind of builds on the principle that organizations are in a way like open books, and you can either choose to focus on problem or focus on successes, and then you tell stories around that and you create a narrative. The fourth is the anticipatory principle, which is you can start to build the future by talking about it. So if you're asked, what's your dream for your system in your dentistry practice, Isa, you probably give me an answer that's full of good ideas and passion and so on. But by doing that, you're building the future. And the last one is the positive principle, which is that positive emotions and dialogue generate, enthusiasm and creativity and long-term change and so on. And there's a cycle of defining, discovering, dreaming, designing, and delivering, which is beautiful. So when I've seen super strong leadership in organizations that are kind and compassionate and so on, they're almost always infused by an ability to ask good questions, and the framing of those questions is usually powered by appreciative inquiry and the kind of beauty of inviting people into a conversation. To me, the misconstruction of leadership is around a heroic, hierarchical leader that has all the questions. That's what we learned in school. Remember, we sat down in a classroom. If we spoke, we were told off, and the teacher always had the answer, and we just needed to read the book and get a test. And we were never invited into a dialogue of saying, "Hey, Isa, what do you think about this math thing? Does 2 + 2 make sense? What do you like to do? You like to play football? Okay, so bring me 4 footballs tomorrow. Let's learn maths by doing." No. Our systems were like that, and we either passed or we failed. So no wonder we're replicating that way of being in leadership. We're hierarchical. We're supposed to have all the answers. And I think that's changing. I think there's hope in the fact that there's leaders like you and others who are embracing a way of leadership that is about doing. So it's about what we do every day. It's not about our strategic plan. And so that's important. But the fundamental thing is how we treat each other, what we do every day, what we do when people are not looking, how much we care, those are things that really, really make a fundamental difference in the leadership ecosystem of people and of organizations. At the end of the day, I think we all crave connection. I think we all crave a sense of belonging. And I think And this is not to quote the white paper, but in the psychology of change white paper that we published a few years ago, what was strongest in our conversations when we were doing the research was this idea of activating people's agency. Agency meaning it's our ability to have a voice and to act. And if you're able to somehow, through questions and conversation, activate the agency of people, we're all much richer, by doing that, rather than keeping people silent and their ideas don't count and so on. There's something beautiful about the opportunity that gets kind of by design given to leaders of actually activating people's agency, and through that activation celebrate their dignity and their wisdom and so on. And through that dignity and wisdom, you get to improvement in a much more sustainable way than by imposing and screaming and being hierarchical and so on. There's a time and a place for that, I'm sure, during high level emergencies and high pressure moments and so on. But for healthcare leadership in general, I think this dialogical approach, which has appreciative inquiry at the heart, which engenders psychological safety so that people feel free to speak out, which activates people's agency, is what we should be striving for to build a better future. And look, what we see in the news is often not connected to that kind of leadership. So we need to be careful about how much we're consuming from the media and how much time we're spending scrolling on our phones, looking at news, looking at social media, because the messages coming through there are potentially a bit less about that kindness and compassion and appreciative inquiry and so on, and more about telling people what to do and threatening and so on. So we need to be mindful about how our information consumption is shaping the way that we behave every day.
I couldn't agree more. And I love this word belonging. I think it's pretty much stronger than inclusion. And I see a lot of people say inclusion and not being very honest with people, just making this diversity, equity, inclusion for companies. And I think belonging matches pretty much with the agency power of the communities. And while you were speaking in Brazil, we had a researcher, an activist in education called Paulo Freire, and he said this education based in vertical communication. He called it a bank bancária, educação bancária. It's a bank education where just it's completely different from what we've learned from IHI. It's all teach, all learn, everybody in round tables. It's a great discussion. I've had this conversation with Maureen last week, and one of the things that just you were there in IHI when I first got in IHI. Remember? And the office had no doors. And I was, how? You guys have no doors. And there were like candles. It's just an invitation for us to get the candles and start a conversation with Don Beric, start a conversation with Maureen. How come? That would never happen in Brazil. At least at that time. I don't know how it is in these days, but I'm just mindful of the time. It's so nice when the conversation flows. People from Latin America, this is how things go. It just flows. Thank you so much, Pedro. But unfortunately, we are coming to a close. Um, if you could share just one message for our people, what would it be? A message of hope. You're good at that.
Uh, this is tricky. But I think that for me, the core thing of the times that we're living is grounding our daily behaviors in the intersection of science and love, and keeping going. That there's a lot of forces that are probably distracting us from what really matters, and and detaching us from our humanity. This space of virtual realities where people kind of want to see how many people like their posts, or hearted their Instagram picture, or And that creates a dopaministic effect that is probably a little more external and superficial than what really moves us as human beings, which is kind of making a difference for each other and kind of treating each other with respect and dignity and so on. So grounding everyday's actions in the intersection of science and law for those that work in healthcare, I think will help us go a very, very long way. And that's core. And the second is being at ease with the paradoxes that we face. I always tell this story. My daughters swim. I have two daughters and they both swim. And one of the coaches said to them one day, they were celebrating a birthday party. There were like 30 girls there. And he said, he's a very veteran coach. He's been coaching for many years. And he said, I want to tell you something before we sing happy birthday. And I was standing there thinking, what is he going to say to them? And he said, girls, you need to remember, you need to swim slow to swim well. You need to swim slow to swim well. And you need to swim well to swim fast. And they were like, oh, what are you talking about? And to me, that description encapsulates the paradox that we live in healthcare, where sometimes the responses are just not black and white. Sometimes we need to swim slow to swim well, and then swim well to swim fast. And so we need to be comfortable with the paradox. And then the third thing, and this is the last one. So science and law, be comfortable with the paradox. And then the last one is to celebrate the resources that we have. Okay. And I'm not saying that we eliminate complaints of saying, oh, we don't have enough of this and enough of that, but sometimes we do it too much. So let's celebrate what we have. And there's a tennis player called Arthur Ashe. He's one of the first African American players that made it into the big stage. The U.S. Open happens every August in New York, and the main court is called the Arthur Ashe Stadium. And he used to say something that I absolutely love, which is to reflect when he was on the tennis court. He said, use what you have. Use what you have. Do what you can with what you have. Use what you have and do what you can with what you have. And as a starting point, I think we need to celebrate the kind of magic of having some resources, and secondly, doing kind of the most that we can with what we have. Sometimes we just focus on what we're missing, and the starting point. So the three pieces of the phrase: start where you are. So that's where you are. Use what you have and do what you can. Start where you are. Use what you have and do what you can. And yes, we may be short of resources. Yes, we may need more, but starting where we are, using what we have and doing what we can is enough. And I think sometimes when we go to bed and we feel unsatisfied and so on, we're being very harsh with ourselves. So ground ourselves in science and love, be comfortable with the paradox, and then, start where we are, use what we have and do what we can, so that we are grounded on the possibility of having the ability to act. So the agency that we carry and the responsibility that comes with the privilege of being able to help other human beings get better and have better health.
Lovely. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here today. Your insights are invaluable to anyone working healthcare improvement. So thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you here. It's been 10 years, I think we met, I guess. So please stay around. We miss you a lot, myself and all the guys from Brazil. And if you want to share your social media, we are happy to follow you. And to our audience, please stay tuned. See you in the next episode. Bye.
Hey, thanks, Isa. Appreciate it.